Right, welcome everybody. I'll declare the meeting open and call on Councillor Naylor to open our meeting with a karakia. Thank you, Councillor Naylor.
Thanks. Tū taua mai runga, tū taua mai raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai waho. Kia tau ai Te Māori tū, Te Māori ora, ki tā katoa, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e.
Thank you, Councillor Naylor. So moving on, this meeting is being recorded and will be live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. Housekeeping and safety procedures are on the screen in front of us, dealing with foreign emergency and health and safety. I'd ask all online participants to keep their cameras turned on and their microphones muted unless addressing the meeting. And for the record today, we have Councillors Johnson and Hapeta online. Welcome. Councillors in person select the voting option on the voting device if they wish to ask a question, comment or propose an amendment. Councillors to use online to use the hands up function. And officers presenting reports, please give your name and role before speaking. And I think that's good. So moving on now to apologies for the meeting. And I have one apology from the Mayor Grant Smith, which I don't believe there are any other apologies. So put that to the vote. And seconded. Oh, sorry, Kate. Sorry. Clunky on the technology.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. An apology for early departure.
Noted. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, so I'll put that motion, seconded, Deputy Mayor, and we'll put it to the vote. Deputy Chair, sorry, my mistake. I'm good at promoting people. Carried unanimously. Thank you. And moving on now, unaware of any additional items for our agenda today. And are there any declarations of interest? None. And I note that we have no members of the public here today and no public comment. So I'll move on to confirmation of the minutes from our meeting on the 6th of March 2024, and I'd like to move that those minutes be confirmed as a true and correct record. I have a seconder, Councillor Naylor. I'll throw that open. Are there any comments or issues or matters arising from the minutes? There are none, so we'll put that to the vote. And that's carried unanimously. So we'll now move on to item 7 on the agenda, our health and safety reports for the period January to March 2024, and I'd welcome Selwyn to the table. Selwyn Ponga Davis.
Kia ora tātou, I Tarangatira, the Chair, Chief Executive Tēnā Korua, tēnā koutou, e nā kai mai, councillors, kia ora tātou. I'm quite happy to state that we've had a slow reduction in front-facing incidents across the council, but unfortunately there has been escalation and some other things. But we are quite happy on how we're tracking at this stage. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Selwyn. Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Selwyn, for the report. I've just really got sort of one quick line of questioning. On page 28, you talk about it's safety training. 87 staff trained in the last quarter. Can you just give us an understanding of the breadth or the extent or the advancement of that training? Are there any other offerings that run after the initial training?
Kia ora. Through the chair, Councillor, we initially had an external provider provide some training, but we've developed our own training packages specifically for those who've been experiencing problems, especially with our parking wardens, specific training for them that is tailored for their needs on how they can work with the public, and also the front of house is also a key area of concentration for us. We recently rolled out, the last training we did was with our parking wardens, and we'll continue to do that as we get new staff coming through council.
So I take it from your answer that you've trained everybody that is eligible or required to do that training to this point?
Yes, that's correct.
So is there any follow-up training that's either being contemplated at this point in time?
I'm looking at an annual review on refreshers. So we're currently just working through getting everybody up to speed, and then we'll look at some refreshers annually.
Ngā mihi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor John.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Thanks, Selwyn. Just in 2.4, you referred to 8 trespass notices having been actioned over the quarter. And I wondered if you could give us, in general terms, an idea of what sort of incidences trespass notices are being issued for, and whether they're a 2-year trespass, or how we're making sure that that's a fair process for the people who are being trespassed.
That might be better answered by Jason. We act as a central repository for reporting on those trespasses, but the process that we have is a graduated process where it can be issued on a 3-day, 7-day or 3 months, going up to 2 years. So those options are available to our staff. So I'll hand it over to Jason, who might be able to better answer that.
Good afternoon, through you, the Chair. To answer your question, Councillor, some of the instances relate to some of our facilities. So there's been there's been thefts from a couple of our facilities. There's been health and safety concerns where our staff have been at risk, where that behaviour was required to have an appropriate consequence to ensure the safety of our staff. For example, there's at the major health and safety issue at Arena where where members of the public had gone onto the field during a rugby game. There's been others that have been verbally trespassed, and that's just in line with our trespass procedure that was put in place last year to help enable our staff to reduce or to enable them to be able to manage situations appropriately at their level before getting escalated at a level that was required.
Okay, so what checks and balances are in place to make sure that a fair process is followed by staff?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a process there where there's some health and safety security advisor, managers of the facility will get together and have a conversation if the need is required for a longer period of 14 days to see whether it's appropriate to have a longer period of time for an incident. We automatically will give staff the opportunity to give a verbal trespass for 7 days, and if that behaviour is continuous, is looked at as a theme where we're able to introduce a written trespass, or if it's of a serious nature, particularly around health and safety, or a criminal activity that the police are involved in, would look at increasing that to a longer period of time.
Okay.
Just through
thank
the
you.
chair as well, sorry, Councillor Johnson, just to add to that, so we also have legal and police involved in looking at those procedures as well to make sure that they're effective.
No, that's great. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure that we had appropriate checks and balances on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harpeter.
You, Mr. Chair, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Just at table 1 on page 17, the number of incidents doesn't seem to appear to be going down. Are we worried about that trend? I don't know whether Jason or Selwyn wants to answer this, but it's continually at a healthy level. Are we worried about the level of incidents that happen across the organisation? Not sure who wants to answer it.
We can only report and gather information on incidents that we're made aware of. We have got a good culture of reporting. Whilst sometimes the amount of incidents we get can be weather related, certainly in the summer months we have higher activities of poor behaviour because there's more people out and about. And in the winter months there seems to be a downturn in these types of events, but we're always alert to any sorts of escalations. What we have seen just in the last month or so is the types of incidents and the types of behaviours are quite concerning on how the public are interacting with our staff.
Thank you, Selwyn. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Ellen. Continuing a bit on the theme around the unfortunate conflict between members of the public and in particular parking staff. What, as an organization, what are we doing to encourage, I guess, better behavior within the community, or kind of normalize better behavior within the community?
I really can't comment on that, Councillor, sorry. I mean, it would be great if everyone paid their warrant of fitness and things like that relating to vehicles. But we appreciate that it's difficult times financially for people. Those stresses obviously bounce back on our staff, unfortunately. So it's very hard to comment on that. We try our best. We empower our parking wardens to work with the public the best they can, but they hit some brick walls and some very difficult customers at times.
Thanks. Just wondering if anybody else might be able to comment around whether we already are, or the potential to run a campaign around, being a bit more civil even when you're in a frustrating situation.
Kia ora, through the chair, Danelle Whakatihi, Chief People and Performance Officer. I think we haven't run a campaign like that. I have seen some other councils that have run some recently with some mixed results around that, especially in the social media space. So if it is something that we are going to look into, we'd have to do that very delicately.
And are we as a council doing anything to look into the potential of that?
Yes, we are.
Thanks. Will options be coming to council around that, or is that something that's currently happening at an operational level?
It's more at an operational level.
Great. Could I understand the kind of time frame around that?
We'll have to get back to you on that one, Councillor.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Through the chair, I might just add to that as well. We do have wellbeing programs and the like in place for our staff as well. I'd kind of see it as an extension on that to make sure that our staff's wellbeing and health and safety is taken care of. Paramount to what it is that we might do in terms of a campaign and the like. So our focus has kind of been around that to start off with, but we'll pick up from your comments, and perhaps we could even just bring something back offline for elected members about what it is that we might be doing in that space.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It certainly is all about planning, and last week we had an exciting exit at this building with a fire alarm, and got to use a different way down. How did that go for you? What did you learn?
Through the Chair, Councillor, there's always opportunities to do it better, but I was quite pleased with the outcome. Staff are more educated and understand what their roles are, especially proud of our floor wardens who do a fantastic job. Yes, there's always opportunities. We can always do it better, but I'm quite pleased on how RASA is working in terms of passing information and opportunities to learn from these events. So I think we're in good space.
Fantastic. Oh, it's good to hear that your team went well, and I saw you downstairs twice communicating, and I thought you did an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Selwyn, thank you for your report. Could I ask, you mentioned in your report about the engagement and the commitment of the ELT to engage in health and safety. Could you just outline for me, how does the ELT engage? What part do they play in the health and safety management system? Could you just provide a little bit more background on that?
So we've taken a different approach from EET level in terms of worker engagement. So what we have created is a space where our chairs from both our operations and from the CAB meet bi-monthly with ELT to look at opportunities for improvement where support is required across the business, and just give a general scope to ELT on how we're tracking in the health and safety and wellbeing space, so that those opportunities are always available. And of course we encourage our people to speak up with their leadership who bring that to the ELT table as well.
And does the ELT engage directly where there are high potential near misses, or, I mean, what sort of prominence or role do they place on their activity in the organisation? Do they actually have part to play other than receiving updates?
Absolutely, as it's highlighted in Uhuru, the commitment statement of the Chief Executive, the responsibility lays with Wade, and he's very, very involved in that process through his leadership team. What we have in place for early alert is the preliminary internal notification for high-level events. That notification goes out to our leadership team within 24 hours or soon after the event, and they are involved in the process, whether it be ICAM or Five Eyes investigations.
Thank you, thank you. So I note in your report there was an incident with chemicals. So just taking that as an example, in the health and safety management system, there would have been a process, I'm assuming, and there would have been a review, changes. How do you know, what do you do to actually make sure that learnings or changes or things that need to be done differently are actually happening in the business? How do you know that what the leadership team and our advisors and yourselves and the people, the senior people involved have learned? How do you know these changes actually stick, that people are following them? What process do you have?
Well, obviously we have our People Safe platform that reports and records all of these happenings. We also have the alert safety bulletin, which promulgated from our investigation. So any learnings will be put out through a safety bulletin or an alert to our business sectors. They're shared across our toolboxes through our health and safety committees to seek assurance across the organisation that the messages around the opportunity to improve on it is put out to our people. And then it's up to my team on the ground to continue to provide support to the business leaders and to ensure that the appropriate actions have been taken place.
Okay, thank you, Selwyn. So when was the last time there was an independently scoped review of our health and safety management system by an external party?
So that was done through Safe Plus. That's what brought me here to Palmerston North through that audit, through the Deloitte and Safe Plus audit. Discussions with Masuma. In due course, we have further developed our safe management framework and put it into the council, and it's operating. The intent is to bring Safe Plus back in to do a review.
So when was the last time they were here? Sorry,
That would have been 2 years ago.
2 years, so we
Yep.
haven't had an independent assessment that's been reported through to a committee for 2 years. Is that
You have to appreciate we've been on a 2-year journey to improve our systems.
It was just
Yeah.
it was a clarification, not a
Thank you.
not a comment. Thank you. Look, my last question is that there's currently WorkSafe taking action against the CEO of Ports of Auckland in his personal capacity in relation to safety events. Are there any observations or learnings that we need to be thinking about in terms of how we can improve and lift our game as regards how we're governing and thinking about health and safety in this organisation?
I think we're on a positive journey. I think we have a leadership team who are committed to the safety well-being of their people. I think it's top priority to get them home to their whānau safely. I think it's starting to develop the culture that we have here in council. When I first arrived, I thought it was quite challenging, but I'm quite confident that we're on a really good journey. And I think as council members and leadership, we can be confident and we can trust in our people that they're making the right decisions.
Thank you. Thank you, Selwyn. We have no further questions, so I'd like to put the recommendation to receive the memorandum titled Health and Safety Committee Report January to March 2024 as presented on 22nd of May, and that the Chief Executive release the memorandum attachments 1 and 3 as soon as practicable. So I'd like to move that. Seconder, Councillor Naylor, thank you. And I'd now throw it open for comments. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to briefly comment on the report, thank you. It's got a lot of good information, shows a lot of good progress in it in a number of areas, but as is always the case, there's always things to work on, things that do come through that can raise concern. I would signal that I am, concerned by the ongoing instances of aggression from members of the public towards staff members out in public spaces doing their jobs. It is concerning to me that that is not just something that's happening occasionally, but is very much becoming a theme, and very keen to see that we, within our power, do everything we can to avoid a future where aggression against our staff becomes normalized anyway in the community. And I accept and appreciate the responses from officers around that it's a delicate one to figure out how to engage with in a way that does move the dial in the right direction, but really appreciate that there is some consideration around that, and would like to see that really prioritized in terms of how we actually engage with our community, so that we can find a way forward as a community where we can get back to an understanding that actually it's not an acceptable situation for members of the public to be aggressive against our staff who are simply doing their job in a public space. So really keen that we do progress some practical, tangible communications exercises with the wider community so that we can get, hopefully get ahead of that before it gets any worse or becomes normalized. So thanks.
Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to say a comment about the aggression, and I think particularly around parking and maybe around dog control. Some of these things are, and I have to say it, are things that people are going to be angry about, and it is very hard for us to have a positive spin about these things. And I think the officers that are in those areas do a very, very good job. And I think the Chief People Officer summed it up very well. And I think it is very much an operational matter and a delicate matter to deal with without trying to put it in the face of people. So I do think that is something that the Chief Executive and his team need to deal with very delicately without us as governance getting in the face of it. So I do think that it is something for the Chief Executive and his team to deal with in a way that's appropriate, because it is a tough area to put a smiley face on. So I really commend those people that work in that area, and good on them, because it is a tough area. But that's all I wanted to say. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Look, I would like to just note my concern and support and agreement with the comments that have been made about the level of public aggression and the difficulties that our staff are taking. I'm also mindful that our business is quite inherently dangerous. And so when I reflect about our health and safety management system, I'm very heartened with your responses, Selwyn, and I've seen in the last years some significant improvements in the quality of reporting. When I reflect on where we're at, and whilst that, we should just always be driven by making sure we do everything we can to keep our people safe, I guess from where I sit and think about the current case that's ongoing with WorkSafe, the questions that are coming out of it, to me, are that directors or chairs and CEs and senior management are actually responsible for making sure that they do everything they can and follow appropriate due diligence and follow up and test and make sure that what they see and hear is actually happening. That would seem to be my lay interpretation of where WorkSafe are going. So when I think about us, and I accept, and I am very pleased with the enormous progress and the engagement that I see and the passion I hear from the team about keeping people safe, for me, I sit back and say, well, for this committee, is it enough to simply receive 3 or 4 written reports from management, or do we need to be doing a little more to make sure that we are applying appropriate due diligence and everything that we can do to keep our people safe, and that we're fulfilling our part of what is a health and safety management system? So I guess that's a challenge to think about for the CE and for the team, is how and what should we be doing more in terms of engagement and fulfilling a role in the overall health and safety management system. I'm very, very pleased to hear that we're planning to have another independent assessment of our health and safety management system and how well ingrained, and are there any weaknesses, or is there anything we need to be thinking about, because we just can't be complacent and we have to keep improving and working. So I'm looking forward to seeing that come through. So a lot of bouquets there, a bit of a challenge in terms of what we need to do and be thinking about from my perspective in terms of how we're making sure that from a governance perspective and throughout the whole health and safety management system, we're applying appropriate due diligence, follow up, and really testing ourselves to make sure that we're not complacent and we are improving all the time. But again, I just think, as you noted, Selwyn, we're on a journey, and I'm very conscious that we've made some really significant improvements in the last few years. So well done, and look forward to continued improvement. No other comments or questions, so I think we can put this recommendation to the vote. I'm happy to move that. Councillor Naylor seconded. That the committee received the memorandum titled Health and Safety Report January to March as presented to Risk Insurance Committee on 22nd of May 2024. Put that to the vote. So we now move to item 8, the Wellbeing Report, and welcome Connie and Katrina to the table. Welcome. In your hands.
Tēnā koutou. Thanks for having the opportunity to talk about the wellbeing activities we've been focused on the last 3 months for the quarter 3. I'm pleased to note that we have been able to start reporting on offboarding or exit survey data as requested in the previous meeting. I'm also aware that we're just in the beginning of this space, and I'm open to any constructive feedback that you may have in terms of how we report the data. So on that note, I would accept the paper as read, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to respond to those.
Thank you, Connie. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks for the report. Just a couple of questions from me. Page 32 has got reference to wellness space usage. I'm just interested to understand what the wellness space is.
So the wellness space is facilities where a staff member can retreat to if they feel they need to have a mental break from pressures in the environment. So we do have a space, a dedicated space in the CIB building. We also have checked out the depot, and they have dedicated spaces. They're quite well set to those. And we are working with the library at the moment to create a space where people can just have some private space if they need to access that, just to gather themselves or just take a breather and relax a bit in terms of pressure that they may experience.
Thank you. So is it something different to a staff room?
Yes, it's more of a private space where you can just collect yourself and maybe practice some of the skills that we like to teach our people in terms of resilience and mindfulness, so that they can use some of the tools and practice them in a private space.
And is that a new initiative, or has it been around for a while?
It's I would say fairly new, but we've been working on it probably for the last 6 to 8 months. At the moment, we're just trying to make sure that all of the facilities has a space, so that is a bit of a work in progress still.
Thank you. And just my second question relates to this page 36, the turnover rate, which has come down significantly over the last year, down to 15 from 20% down to 15.2%. I'm just interested to understand if you consider if there's an ideal target for the amount of turnover in an organisation that you would be, that you think would be optimum.
I will just hand it to Katrina as this in the space of the people operations team.
Through the chair, kia ora tātou. My name's Katrina Ives. I'm a people operations advisor. I'm here for Wayne, who is my manager. And I think probably I'd like to defer to Janelle to answer this question, please.
Nicely done, Katrina. If we look at a budget figure, usually we budget around 10%. So for attrition, so that's kind of the number that we would be looking at. But at the moment, I think the national average is sitting around 14%. So I don't think we're too far off that. And of course, I believe that the numbers will start to drive down across the larger sector because of some of the significant changes happening in central government.
Thank you. That's helpful. Yeah, that's all from me. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Connie, could you just remind me, when was the last time this organisation had a cultural survey to sort of test across the broad working population how people feel about their workspace, their units, the organisation generally?
So we do have what we call Tuia Te Whakaaro, which is actually the voice and thoughts of our people, and for us to listen and act on those ideas. So we have run that survey in April last year, and we're just considering the time at the moment with all of the changes going on to rerun the survey as soon as everything has kind of settled down.
So what did it tell us last year? What did it say about working for this organisation?
Okay, so, about the what specifically? Sorry, I just need a little bit more information.
Are people satisfied? Are they happy? Are there things or areas or parts of the culture that we need to change? Are there areas of the business that we need to refocus on?
Yes, so what we are focusing on the moment as an organisation, as a direct result of that survey, is basically to really look at how we do performance enablement conversations, how people connect to the values of the organisation, and also parts of the spaces that we need to look at very carefully as ways of working, of which flexible working arrangements was one big piece that we actually completed, and not flexible, hybrid working arrangements that we've signed off on. So it's about how do we work as an organisation across the organisation that needs area of improvement from a consistency point of view. And then leadership development would always be a critical aspect, as our leaders are really important, to translate the strategy and the plans of the organisation into activities and deliverables. So they are a really key component to impact on the experience of employees. So the survey is based around key drivers for employee experience. We also built in an engagement score. The engagement score did tell us that it's in a fairly good place, but there is definitely room for improvement, but it's not in a space where, that I regard as being a problem area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Apologies, there was one other question I had that I forgot. On page 34, under the exit survey information, the bottom one there is manager supervisor. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Of course. So I feel like it is part of this reporting is just to take into account that there's very few data that we collect over a 3-month period. So if you look at the data, this is based off 10 respondents. And so it's really, really small. If I look at the trends across the last 12 months, I would regard the first 5 themes as being fairly consistent across the 12 months. That particular theme, the manager and supervisor, doesn't tend to surface. It was 2 responses that actually uplifted it into that space. You would note that it went 5 spaces up. So this is only the data for the last 3 months. If we reflect on the last 12 months, it's not a key theme, if that makes sense.
So I probably need to be more specific with my question. I guess what I'm saying is, are you suggesting that someone's leaving because they don't like their manager or supervisor? Or is it because they are moving? Yeah, I'm just, sorry, just because it says manager supervisor, I just
couldn't quite understand what that meant. Yes, it would mean that how the exit survey is structured is that people get the opportunity to select the key reasons for leaving, and they have 3 options to select, which means one person can select 3 themes as the reason for why they were leaving. So in the last quarter, there were 2 responses that indicated that the manager or supervisor had a role to play in their reason for leaving. But overall, if we take the data across the last 12 months, this theme is not typically always very high. It sits at around 7%. If you take it across 12 months. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that, just looking at it at a quarterly basis might be a little bit of a small data base to base it on.
Thank you. So you obviously do have, this is quarterly response, and you do have an annual, you have data that's on an annual basis?
Yes.
Would it be possible?
Or the last 12 months,
Yeah.
yes.
Would it be possible to include that in the reporting?
I can do that.
Yeah, lovely, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Katrina and Connie. Just a question about how you're using the data that you're getting from the exit interviews. I mean, it's one thing to do the interviews and chart the data, but what are we doing with it? How are we using it to improve our practice?
Yes, so we do take note of it as part of our program of works, and we do check that it actually, if we plan our program of works in terms of key drivers for engagement, that we address these. So career development is a fairly complex issue to resolve. There's not one single bullet that would be the answer, silver bullet that would be the answer to fix that. So we are working with our ELT on a plan to actually address that, because that is also, it's becoming more and more important for the new generations to have career development opportunities. So we are definitely taking note of it, and we are making plans to address those. So it's definitely not just being shelved.
Okay, thank you for that. That's great. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Michelade.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had a question that I'm trying to fill a gap. I'm trying to fill a gap in my understanding of this. I see here on page 32 where you've stated the number of programs or trainings available to staff and categorize them under prevent harm, provide support, enhancing well-being.
Yes.
And I think my question is largely around, I can see that there are some good training programs happening here, but my question is largely around, is there some sort of compulsory training for staff that they have to attend or do?
So one of the things that we need to work on is the learning and development strategy, where we can really categorize and label our training into those categories. But we definitely expect or encourage strongly that all of our staff do go through creating respectful workplaces is one of the key areas. And then in the new leadership development program, we will definitely expect our managers to be also able to conduct well-being support check-ins. So those are some of the things that we would expect our people to be able to feel confident doing.
So it's just,
So I can't say on a formal basis that any of those at the moment is mandatory, but we will be working towards a system or a training approach that we will categorize some of the trainings and then start monitoring who has and hasn't done it. The biggest problem or challenge that we are facing at the moment is that we don't have HRIS systems that automatically track. So everything needs to be done manually, and we don't have the capacity to enforce mandatory training expectations.
and when do you expect the organization to sort of develop that capacity?
I may defer that to Danelle, as it is one of our, I feel like it's in the long-term plan somewhere.
We're not too far away from our leadership capability framework and what that's going to look like for us as an organisation. Once we've approved that as a senior leadership team, I think, as Connie said, that's at the time where we can go, okay, this is the stuff that we expect all of our people to go through. This is the stuff that we think people can opt into, but we definitely are going to have a core part where we would expect our managers all to have some of the baseline training. We are hoping that we can kick off some of that basic stuff in the new year, so from July onwards, and have it really implemented over the next 8 months.
Yeah.
And I think my other question will also be around the courses of training that are being provided to staff. And I think the evolution that I'm seeing in other workplaces or organizations, also the compulsory sort of uptake of, diversity courses or training or Treaty of Waitangi courses or training. Is it something that's probably going to be reflected? Because I can see here there's a lot of harm, sort of prevention and well-being sort of things, but as part of the professional development, is it something that the organization is also seeing or looking at doing?
Yes, so the training that's noted in here is only relevant specifically to well-being. So we quite excited about the fact that we are working on a diversity, equity and inclusivity framework as we speak. That would soon come to go to our ELT for sign-off. But in that space, we do have training offerings going at the moment that people can attend, like the War Walk. We have partnered with Manawatu District Council for the War Walk, so there is definitely opportunities that we have available for people, and we're also internally working on offerings with our principal Maori advisory lead to create internal offerings that can be consistently become a part of our onboarding processes eventually.
Thank you. That's very helpful to know.
Yes.
I look forward to it. But thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Harpeter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question about lost time days on page 36. I said that's not to do with non-work injuries. So was that to do with more like people that are on long, basically have long illnesses?
Through the chair, I believe the lost time statistics there includes workplace and non-workplace injuries.
Okay.
So ACC data, whether they be off because of a workplace injury or something that happened outside of the workplace.
Are these people replaced, or do they get substitutes in?
Through the chair, I defer to Danelle.
Through the chair, I think it depends on what role that they're in. There are some roles that are frontline essential roles that we would have to find some appropriate cover, but there are some other roles where we can delegate the work across a team for a short period of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Connie. Just one question from me on page 34 regarding the Unmind app. I see on point 1.7 it says app usage has increased this quarter. I was just wondering, is that increased from 10 to 11 or 100 to 200, or what scale are we talking?
I have to come back to the exact data, but how we calculate it is the hours spent in the app and what the unit per hour is, the cost is per hour. So what it means is that the more people use it, the more cost effective the tool becomes. So that's how we calculate it, yes.
Would it be possible to get that data in the next version of this report?
Yes, I will make sure that it's in there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor, and that I think brings us to the end of questions. So we have a recommendation to receive the memorandum titled Wellbeing Report January to March 2024 Quarter 3 as presented to the Risk and Assurance Committee on 22 May 2024. Happy to move that. The seconder, Councillor Naylor, thank you. I'll now throw this open for any comments.
Thank you. Yeah, once again, really good report. Just a couple of things to comment on. Thanks for the exit survey information. I think it is really useful information to have reported, and particularly to add the further information around some sort of comparison to what that looks like over a year, just to understand if there are any trends. I think going forward, having that included in the reporting would be really useful. Really positive, I think I mentioned, touched on this in the last quarter report, really positive to see the ongoing improvement in terms of the turnover. I think moving from a 20% in March last year to 15% now is a pretty significant shift, and I think really does reflect that people are happier to stay working here. It wasn't a trick question in terms of what's considered optimum. I know when we were at the DHB board, they were always aiming for 12%, recognising that actually it is healthy for an organisation to have some turnover. And I thought, 14 or 15% is not that far off that. So, but I didn't know if there was an optimum for local government in terms of what was considered ideal. But I think that's really positive and to be commended for the senior management team in terms of the environment that they're creating for the staff.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Johnson.
Yes, I was going to comment positively on the reduction in the turnover rate as well, which I think it was certainly a big concern to elected members that it was so high some time ago, and I think it's only fair and right to recognise that we're very happy to see it coming down, and to pass our thanks and congratulations to the CE and his staff for that improvement. No one likes to think that the workplace that they're responsible for governing is not a happy place to work. And so I think all elected members are happy to see that coming down. But wider than that, there's significant cost, as we've seen, that's associated with needing to recruit constantly and train new people, and also a sort of a loss of continuity of knowledge that can happen when there's too high turnover in an organisation. So I think there's significant benefits to the organisation as well as the people working in it from seeing the turnover come down. So congratulations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harpeter.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just want to comment briefly just to say congratulations to the Chief Executive and to the Chief People Officer, just to say that the programs that have been put in place in terms of all the wellbeing programs and the training that's been put in place is looking really good, and it's great as a governor to see all of these programs that have been put in place and to see the output that's coming out of it. So thank you for showing us this work. It's really good to see that from a transparency point of view. We really appreciate seeing these reports. So thank you very much. And it's really good to see all of this activity that's coming out of this area. And hopefully that fruit of that is coming, and what we're seeing is the turnovers coming down as a result of all that wellbeing that's been put into the organisation. So thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that brings us to the end of comments, so we'll put this recommendation to the vote. That's been carried unanimously, so thank you to the management team for those reports. And that now brings us to agenda item 9, the strategic risk management reporting, January to March, and Stephen Minton and Jason McDowell to the top table. Welcome.
Good afternoon, councillors. I'm Stephen Minton, Risk Management Advisor. We're here to present a paper on strategic risk management and 2 strategic risks. As you will recall, we presented to the Risk and Assurance Committee last time the strategic risk descriptions and definitions, and it was on the item that we would work on going forward. Officers have now completed the first 2 to be presented here today. These are the culmination of work that's done both at an operational level within risk management across the organisation, and it brings together our views of where we are on the journey around the risk management for these first 2 strategic risks. Obviously, risk management's an iterative review process, and we will be coming back periodically with these strategic risks with updates as to where we are, and also in the coming meetings we'll also be presenting the other outstanding 9 risks that we are working on at the moment. So I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a number of questions related to the chart on page 43, the strategic risk of failure to meet financial obligations. The first question is the 3rd item down there says program deferral. It says in the comment around the action plan and considerations that it should be kept in mind that this will potentially result in higher costs for those programs deemed necessary. I'm just wanting to understand, when it's talking about program deferral, are you talking about operational programs, renewal capital programs, or new capital programs, or all of the above?
That would probably be for all types of programs when it comes to program deferral.
So with capital new programs, why would it be a higher cost to defer a capital new program?
Well, with deferral in regards to time deferral, then there's a cost for that, with increased costs generally would be the principal reason for the increased costs.
Okay, so have the operational and renewal costs that are associated with capital new programs been considered in that statement?
It's more around the, well, operational costs will increase over time as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would have an influence as well. So for example, a one-off program, if it was deferred that had operational aspects in the expenditure, if it was deferred for 3 years, for example, one would expect that inflation would add to the cost of that.
Okay, thank you. Just moving on to the levels of service item there. You know, it's looking at the action there is ongoing review of levels of service. The second bullet point talks about continually review that all services provided are appropriate. Just wondering what the mechanism for reviewing the levels of service continually would be.
I'll take the first stab at that. Scott Manser, Finance Manager. Predominantly that would be through the long-term plan process, and a lot of those levels of service are actually set by elected members. Officers, as we build those plans and strategies, would consider what things and would provide any advice on whether we think there should be a change there, in much the same process that you've been through over the last 6 to 9 months.
So thank you. I expected that the main process would be the long-term plan. So because it said continually, I mean the long-term plan happens once every 3 years. Is this suggesting that there's some other ongoing work that should be happening to address that, or?
Every time we do the budget on an annual plan basis, we also review what we're doing. Is it necessary? We make those decisions there, and in conjunction with the Chief Executive and the senior team, make any decisions there, and if there's a need, it'll come back through the chamber.
Okay, thank you. And just moving down to the next one, the commercialisation of assets and services, that one, the control rating has got ineffective there. It talks about needing to explore potential opportunities with asset owners for generating long-term income streams. Is that work, I understand, I'm aware that we've asked for some work around that. Is that referring to the report that is coming back to us later in the year around utilising or better utilisation of our assets, or is this a broader piece of work than that?
It's a bit broader than that, but that is one part. Speaking to the reason of the control rating, it's ineffective because it takes such a long time, and we need to do some investigative work around what those assets would be we could use and how we could use them. So that's why the control rating is ineffective at the moment. It's a long lead-in time to that piece of work, and I'll, now that I see for an honour, pass over to him as well.
Thank you, through Mr. Chair. I think if you consider this long-term plan process where there has been discussions around what are those opportunities, and probably a more direct reference in things like the draft finance strategy and the long-term plan at the moment, I guess the rating of ineffective highlights the fact that we have some work to do to actually identify the opportunities. They would come back through this chamber as to what those opportunities may be, and I guess also it links in a little bit with the improvement program that was highlighted through the business assurance review around commercial advisory and what the potential is in that space. So there is potential through both of those items, the long-term plan, financing strategy, and what was signalled through the business assurance review to improve that rating.
Okay, thank you. I did have a couple more on this page, if that's right. The next one down is increased fees and charges, and this was raised as a potential lever in our long-term plan process. It talks about in the action plan reviewing fees and charges, and it talks about full recovery from users in commercial or development arena. We haven't seen reports come through that meaningfully address that issue to date. I think our annual, anyway, when would we expect that? Once again, I would have thought that this is something to be addressed through the long-term plan process, and if we haven't looked at it in this long-term plan process, I'm just wondering at what point that will be looked at.
Yeah, that's a great question. Fees and charges is a broad subject. As you can imagine, there's a large number of fees and charges in there. The one example that Stephen's just whispered in my ear was the development contributions policy, which obviously has just been updated and just been out for consultation. That's one aspect of that. I think there's been resolutions passed in relation to the arena, also through that long-term plan process for further work to happen in that space as well. So it'll be a process of working our way through all of those areas and bringing them back as time and resourcing allows for that, with the intent of either working towards the next long-term plan or the one after that for some of those pieces of work.
Okay, so can you just clarify what the arena work is around that? Because I haven't seen that in the LTP. What are you referring to? Are you talking about CET arena?
Yeah, there was a resolution passed to check that use and or fees and charges.
Okay.
Long-term plan. Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. That resolution we haven't yet done. So.
Okay. Thank you. And just the final.
Sorry. I'll just jump in there as well. Just also remind councillors, this is about ability to be able to meet your financial obligations. So these are controls and mitigations that you could use, but you already have a number of policy settings already in place for fees and charges and your financial contributions, the public-private split associated with each of the different activities. So these are mechanisms that you could use if all of a sudden we were unable to meet our financial obligations. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. The last one there, or perhaps it relates to the first one and the last one, in terms of the revenue we have coming in. I'm just wondering, the changes to our rates remission policy, which could potentially mean that there's quite a number of people in our community who access that policy in the future, compared to now. Do we have any, has anyone done any estimation of how much revenue we might lose with applications coming through for that 50% remission?
Through you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just trying to recall back to that report at the time. I think when we did do that report, it was assessed that the actual amount, it is very hard to quantify because we don't know who might not apply and meet the specifics of that criteria. But at the time, I do recall that it was a fairly limited amount likely that people might actually apply under that particular new remission that's been created. So I don't think it's going to have a material impact at all on council's overall funding streams at this point.
Okay, thank you. That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, gentlemen, for the report. Probably drive my questions off page 40, the table there. Would be interested to know what the outlook is in terms of getting through that full table for assessments.
So we are making some good progress. Obviously, as you can see, there's one that's already been completed that's not in this pack. So we have completed 3. I would say that I have at least 3 others that are well advanced already. So there's potential that at the next Risk and Assurance Committee in September that I would be in a position to present 4 strategic risks, which would then take us to 6. Given we want to get through the whole lot each year, we're probably on track to still be able to achieve that.
Great, that's heartening. When a gap's identified, like we have in Risk 6 now, between where we want to be and where we're at, what happens?
So risk owners need to come up with, I guess, a development plan as to how they're going to address that. You will see within that particular one, the health, safety and wellbeing, there are quite a number of areas that are categorised as partially effective. I would say, though, that most of those are on the very cusp of becoming effective, and there's quite a lot of work that's already being done in that arena to bring them to a state of effectiveness. Some of that work may already have been completed. However, we wouldn't change it to effective until we'd had seen evidence that it was working well. So, for example, for that particular one, my expectation would be that we'll be moving closer towards risk tolerance over the coming months and quarters.
Thanks. And then in terms of an actual reassessment period, is that kind of a 12-month thing then, or how?
It would be as a minimum 12 monthly, or if the risk owner asked for a reassessment to be done sooner, we would do that. Or if there was a material change, then we would go and do a reassessment as well. Or material change, positive or negative.
And when there's a need for resource to actually address issues within there, how does that work?
Well, that's up to the risk owner to determine how they deal with that. Obviously, the risk assessment process itself is done by the risk area in conjunction with the risk owner and their support staff. Ultimately, if the risk owner feels that the risks are unacceptable, that require additional controls or mitigation, that requires resource allocation, then that's potentially through the annual budget or long-term plan process.
And are those things seen as taken prior, let's assume that it doesn't need to come to the table, that it could be internally reallocation of resource.
Yeah.
But what priority is given around this vis-a-vis other things that that dollar could be used for?
Well, ultimately, it's around the acceptance of the risk. You don't always have to bring your risks down to the lowest possible level. Sometimes it may not be possible, and the decision then needs to be made. Will we accept the risk where it sits, or will we stop doing that activity to remove the risk?
Cool. Great. Thank you all, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Stephen, thanks for the report. I had some questions which are perhaps on the same line of questioning of Councillor Barrett, but in particular, I was just very interested to hear how ELT are engaging in this risk management process in the business more broadly, and more specifically, from your perspective, is ownership and accountability across all 11 risks clearly defined? Are there mitigation strategies in place? Is there monitoring of how those mitigation strategies are going? Are there appropriate feedback loops? How is this risk management process actually being brought to life in the business?
There's a lot of questions there. I'll try and address.
Well, think of it as, is there actually a system? Is there engagement? Are there mitigations? Are we following up and checking them?
I guess the answer I would say is yes. I mean, I am engaged individually with each of the risk owners, which are ELT members, and we spend a considerable amount of time with individual ELT members going through their risks and drafting up the risk management documents. The two that are presented today are being presented on the basis that they were presented also to ELT as a collective for their collective ownership and sign-off. So going forward, that will continue to be the case. The expectation would be that the collective ELT would own them as well, and so significant changes would need to make it back to the table of ELT. We do go through that iterative process of reviewing where we are. Some of the controls perhaps are a little subjective, but we do go through and query and question how the controls are working. Some things perhaps at a more operational level, there are ways to do assurances much more simply and easily, but given the nature of some of these strategic controls, they are a little bit more subjective, but there is a questioning around how they are working.
So are risk owners members of the ELT?
They are only the strategic risks are only owned by ELT.
Thank you. Great. And look, just reflecting for a moment on those 11 risks, are there any trends or issues emerging in the environment? Are they still the appropriate 11 risks? Is there anything that's advanced up and become more important or less important since we last looked at and considered these matters?
Look, there's no right or wrong answer as to how many we should have. We just happened to land on 11. And we haven't looked at prioritising them. We're trying to work through them in no particular order, really. Obviously, the health and safety and wellbeing one that's been presented today, I think it would be fair to say that that is a high priority. I mean, looking after our people has to be the first priority, I guess, in everything. Beyond that, we've not prioritised anything. We did say previously that if there were more new emerging strategic risks that we would bring them back to this committee for consideration, but at this point nothing's come up. We're spending most of our time just working on the current 11.
So there's nothing, there are no risks in here that you feel are particularly deficient in terms of mitigation and target risk that this committee needs to be aware of? Is there anything you want to draw to our attention?
I mean, I have started work on project and project delivery, and obviously that's often a fraught subject with regards to whether or not projects are delivered on time and within budget.
but we're still going through the assessment process on that, so I haven't been able to form a view. I've also started work on this, on the information protection one and around cyber security. That's an ever-increasing risk for organisations across the world, and I think that to the elected members, there's been some reporting perhaps done on that in the past, but obviously that is an ever-increasing issue and risk, and that's why actually I am working on that one now.
Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, sorry to come back in. Just one further question on that, on page 43 in terms of that risk, strategic risk. I'm just interested to understand under the action plan, it says develop a plan of individual actions which are assigned to owners. I'm just wondering what the next steps are in terms of when we would expect to see any further reporting back on that action plan.
I hadn't intended or wouldn't intend that the actual action plans would come back. They'd be of an operational nature for the risk owners to develop with their people and teams as to how they're going to deal with these things. Ultimately, once the action plans have been dealt with, and given this is an iterative process, the reporting back on where we currently sit or in the future where we sit will be an indication as to how those action plans have been dealt with. Not sure if that answers your question.
Okay. So there's essentially, aside from us understanding what the risk rating is and that being reported, you don't actually report after what we see today any further on that?
I will bring this paper back up again at some point within the next 12 months with where we currently are. We obviously have a lot of papers that sit in the background as of an operational nature that support what you see today around much more detailed action plans and that, but that's at a very operational level and very granular and into the weeds. But you will, when we report back on this on these particular risks, we'll have a sense on the success or not of the actions.
So can I, sorry, that just leave.
Sorry, and I should also say, and obviously that would also come through in either LTP or annual budget processes as well, potentially.
Okay. So how much of this risk do you think in the actions are mitigated through elected member decisions? I guess, how do I ask that? I mean, a lot of this will be for debate next week in terms of things that significantly affect this. And that's obviously at a governance level. What's the interaction? I realise there's some very operational stuff here, but there's quite a big crossover by issues that elected members have to grapple with in terms of this issue. Where do you see the ongoing process reported in a way that can help inform elected members?
Yeah, through the chair. Our goal and intention is to deliver a long-term plan for you, for your consideration, that is able to meet your financial obligations. That's your decision then to sign off what that actually looks like. What this strategic risk is that if at some point during the life of a long-term plan or during a year or a particular significant event occurs that we were unable to meet our financial obligation, then we would factor in all of these levers to try and make sure that we were able to pay our bills and those sorts of things. That's what it's about.
Okay, so is it not about mitigating it before it gets to that point? This action plan?
Yes, it is. So those are the sorts of things that then on an operational basis, management then take these things and then ensure that there's actions and plans in place to make sure that we're meeting those financial obligations. That's what it's about. This at this high level is for you to have a look across and go, are we comfortable with this? Are we comfortable with those mitigations and that this is being taken care of?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Harpeta.
questioning to the people that were in front, and I can't remember their names, I'm sorry. But it's really about risk 2, and it's being a bit more specific about risk 2. And it's talking about the wastewater and maybe having a risk around failure to deliver the wastewater project or failure to deliver the wastewater project within the budget that we've got at the moment. In the time frame we've got, and in the consent that we potentially haven't got or will get. So I'm just wondering if that should be more of a specific risk, rather than having it as failure to deliver key projects and programs, if we should have a specific risk around wastewater.
Cameron.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So in terms of this particular risk, which is failure to meet financial obligations, obviously we actually have a category. You see, there's a category there called debt raising capability, and in particular off-balance sheet raising. So, as you're aware, through the long-term plan process, the Nature Calls program in particular is assumed to be funded off-balance sheet. If for whatever reason, as we go through the process of obtaining that off-balance sheet funding, we weren't able to obtain it, then that would change, I guess, the level of risk of being able to meet our financial obligations pertaining to that project. Then we would have to come up with an action plan or an alternative plan as to how we might then be able to meet our financial obligations. That might be either scope of project, alternative funding options, and so forth. So that would trigger, I guess, this coming back to say, well, in that case, can we or can we not meet our funding obligations at the moment? That is a tool that is available to us, and we are able to use that. It will have to go through an affordability test, and it'll be at that point whether the risk rating would change based on that decision at that time.
It's not just, sorry, I don't know if I've been cut off. It's not just about the finance. It's also about delivery of the project and getting the consent on the project. There are other factors rather than just the finance.
Yep. So through Mr. Chair, I would expect that would probably be covered off. Some of these things will be covered off in multiple strategic risks. There is a strategic risk around program delivery, which the risk management advisor just advised is working on at the moment. There will be categories in there that the effect of being able to deliver for whatever part of a program would be impacted.
Okay, I'll just leave it to comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Questions? So we have a recommendation that the committee receive the strategic risk assessments and the two noted strategic risk 1, strategic risk 6, and the strategic risk dashboard section 5.2. So happy to move that recommendation, seconded by Councillor Naylor, and we'll go to comments and Councillor Zabelin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to thank the officers for these risk assessments. I've found it extremely helpful and will in the future, I'm sure. Particularly your answers today have highlighted for me the importance of our risk tolerance settings and showing what actually happens process-wise when a risk is unacceptable and what levers we have to bring that risk down to a tolerated level. And also I think the role that risk tolerance settings play in proactive mitigation and management of that risk. So I'm really, really looking forward to receiving the next 6 and then the others in due course, particularly around risk 10, which is the failure to manage critical and strategic assets. I think these are going to be very foundational documents and extremely useful. So just thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hapeta.
Thank you. I have to probably disagree with Councillor Zabelin. I do think that I think we need to be a bit more specific with some of our risks, and in particular the wastewater. And I don't see it appear in here. It's too generic. Some of these risks in here are not talking specifically about projects that we have and we should have. And that is one project that should have a project on its own. The officer talked about it being hidden in other projects in terms of financial and in terms of project delivery, but it's a major project for us. And we have got a lot of the community that are not trusting us. So when you look at risk number 11, loss of public trust, that one should be way up the list of what we should be doing with that, because we have got a lot of the public that aren't very happy with us at the moment about a lot of things that we are doing. And we've just got a lot of things going on. So I just think that we do need to deal with wastewater in a different way, and we do need to have it as a risk on its own and not just hidden under other project categories. That's just my view. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I think this is a very good report, and I know my questions have very much focused on the strategic risk around failure to meet financial obligations. I did spend quite a bit of time looking at this, and I think it's a really important piece of work that I don't really want us as elected members to lose sight of. I think often my observation is that we can get some really meaningful reports like this through, but they don't always follow through in other reports that come to us from other parts of the organisation. And I think there could be room for improvement in terms of some of the alignment of some of the reporting that we get. So I guess as an example, you know, one of the action plans and mitigating this risk is around our levels of service. I think we missed a real opportunity with our long-term plan process where there wasn't a meaningful examination of our operational services what's outlined here is consideration must be given to whether or not a service needs to be continued to be provided by council. I don't think for us to meaningfully do this as elected members, we're really going to need some help from officers to find a pathway of how that would look to meaningfully carry that out. I think the risk, the category that's identified there in terms of debt, off-balance sheet debt, the control rating has been put there as effective. I do question that, given that we haven't tested it with the level of funding that we're requiring in terms of that. The comment there is that there's been very little activity in this area. So I do wonder how we've got a control rating of effective. The raw risk for this is extreme. That's what's identified by this report. The residual risk is medium, and my understanding is it's only medium if we do carry out these actions. I think as elected members, we need to actually have some regular reminders and ask ourselves the question if we are meaningfully carrying out some of these actions. So I'll leave the comments, but certainly, yeah, perhaps, and the only thing to add, I think what really stood out to me when I read this was in that very first comment under the key controls. In terms of our legislation, technically we can levy rates from property owners to an unlimited amount. I mean, we all know that is not affordable by our community for us. If we do not carry out the actions or implement some of the actions in this plan, the consequences are that we have to resort to rating our community in unlimited, possibly an unreasonable amount in order to compensate for that, and that really concerns me. And I know a lot of this is about what we might need to consider next week, but I think this is a really good action plan that we do not need to, we need to not lose sight of this.
Thank you, Councillor. Just reflecting on this conversation, I think we've had a good conversation around a number of really quite important risks. So, and it's great to be on the journey, and I certainly appreciated getting this reporting. I feel that it would be enhanced next time round. And I appreciate that we are working our way through, and I don't want to sound impatient, but I would appreciate knowing and understanding of the 11 risks, who's responsible, what the unmitigated, mitigated and residual risk is, and how do we feel about it, and have an opportunity where there are issues to debate at a more macro level to be comfortable that we're across any major changes or any major deficiencies, as well as receiving what I would describe as really valuable deep dives into particular risks. I think that's perhaps the next step in terms of taking this forward, in my view. So I'd put that out to the management team to think about how you might move us towards that. But I certainly have appreciated the conversation today, and I think it's been a valuable discussion. So thank you for that. Are there other comments? In which case, Councillor Harpeter, if you cast the vote. So that's carried. Carried unanimously, thank you. We'll move to the committee work schedule, page 51. Are you talking to this, mate? Did you want to?
It'll be very brief.
Very briefly, in your hands then.
Through the chair, happy to take any comments, questions. Shall I add it? No, nothing.
Could you just outline for me the plan around and the timing around that health and safety review, and just confirm that that will be an independent assessment?
Through the chair, I'll just be checking with Danelle on that. You've got a plan around that? Yes, you've got a plan around that. Would you like to speak to what that plan is? Timeframes? Yeah, we'll get some more detail and come back to you on that one.
And just how will it be scoped up? What's the plan around scoping that review?
Yep, I'll need to take that on notice as well and come back to you.
Thank you. So, Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question regarding a to be confirmed item on page 52 regarding a Three Waters transition asset and liability assessment. Just wondering why that's still on the work schedule, given that program no longer exists.
Yeah, through the chair, actually, I did circle that. Apologies, I should have made a comment on it as well. So I've just noted next to that, you know, we're still waiting for the new legislation to help enable what a time frame might be around any sort of transition and what that looks like in that moving forward as well.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Further questions? Receive its work schedule dated May 2024. Happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Put that to the vote. Thank you. And we're done, carried unanimously. We will now move into excluding the public and into our confidential session. Sorry. So we need to put the recommendation as noted to exclude the public, and I won't read that because it's on the screens. So I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Naylor, and we'll put that to the vote. So that is 10 votes for and 1 against. So we'll carry that. And